I've been directing music videos for 10 years for lots of bands all around the world, mainly in like metal and hardcore and punk, lots of big labels, which has been great. Then I wanted to get more into doing narrative work. So about 2018, I applied to the Science Museum in London to make a new version of Frankenstein, which was interactive. So that's my first sort of go at interactive filmmaking. So that was a film called Pandemic, which was about what happens if the world is overtaken by a global pandemic and the moral implications of that, which I sort of weirdly predicted the future in, which is quite fun. It is less complex than Save Luna, so it's I think only 8 endings, and I do slightly cheat with the endings in that one because a couple of them point you to a similar ending. That was an amazing experience. It had the actress Jenny Agutter in it, and it was really well received at the Science Museum. And so then when I saw that the Whatifi were looking for films, they'd opened their Filmmaker fund for the first round, I applied to that. I'm really interested in how interactive filmmaking can make the audience more engaged in a film and really question their own moral decisions. So we were remaking Frankenstein, but saying, what if you were making some sort of creature that is part human, part animal, entirely designed for its organs to be harvested? What are the ethical implications of that? And I think what really worked and what the audience said was, because they were making the decisions, they felt more engaged, they felt more empathy and more sympathy for the characters within it because they were actually doing it to them. And that's my background really, so it's really visual. I mean, I've had diversions into lots of different things. I started as a cinematographer, I've done video art, I did a lot of film journalism for a while, so it's kind of been a messy career that's kind of led to a really interesting place. So the UK and lots of different parts of the world are falling into kind of populist politics or problematic far-right politics, and I was really interested in how that sort of totalitarian structure emerges, but I was interested in doing it in a story where you've got a very personal problem to solve, which is about your family, and so you'll do anything to help your child, but accidentally along the way you're supporting a terrible regime. Because I think you always hear people who go, oh, if I was in a fascist society I'd stand up to people and things, and you go, well, you probably wouldn't, because you've got to survive day to day. And so that was the start of it. And then I wanted to put in lots of really interesting genre elements that I really like. I love Polish and Soviet sci-fi films, so I wanted to bring in like that kind of feel to it. And it kind of spiraled out of that idea really of, what if you've got something very personal that you need to solve in a very corrupt system? In some way you have to become corrupt to survive in that system.
My daughter is sick and we need a bit extra to cover expenses.
How's Luna?
I love narrative filmmaking. I think narrative filmmaking is great, but I think there is something about the core of interactive filmmaking which implicates the viewer in a really interesting way, and I think implicates is the word. It makes you complicit in these decisions that are made. And so I kind of am interested in, you're an audience member, you're playing it, but somewhere in the background I want the game to be playing you, so that at the end, yeah, you've done what you wanted to do, but you've also inadvertently made this happen, because that's the cost for that. And so that's what makes it interactive, because the thing that I'm trying to deal with is, you know, an individual's implication in a larger corrupt society. And I think if you watch that as a story that was, it's a character, they're going through it, you'd be engaged, but you wouldn't feel as implicated at the end. It's like you've put these people through it. Why have you done this to them? Rather than, oh, they made those decisions. I wouldn't have made those decisions. And you kind of walk away feeling quite nice about it. Whereas like at the end, hopefully of this, you go, oh my God, I've made those decisions. I've done this awful thing. So that's for me why it needed to be interactive. Putting people in a difficult position to really understand the sort of costs and losses of the decisions that they make. It wouldn't have happened without Whatifi's involvement, and it was a wonderful investment in us as filmmakers. It was a really young crew who got a great experience from it and a great step up the career ladder. I think the creative support in terms of feedback and notes was as useful as the funding. and I mean that quite genuinely. The funding was amazing, but also the fact that you got someone reading this script, you got someone giving you notes, you had someone at the end of a phone or a Zoom call who was going to talk to you about things. That is quite invaluable as much as the funding itself, that you've got people who are kind of guiding you through it and really in the best possible way questioning what you're doing and engaging with it. And that is very rare in terms of what you get with a lot of funding, but it was great for what if I gave me. I'd seen As Dead as It Gets and Anatomy of a Decision, and what I really liked was there was a commitment to a level of cinematic storytelling within this environment rather than just kind of functional filmmaking, which was really nice, so that there was a real consideration of this is a film, it is interactive, rather than it just being it's a game or it's not quite serious. There's a seriousness to it, which I really liked. I was also really intrigued by the fact that it's a mobile platform, that it's a kind of intimate platform. It became more interesting when we thought when we realised we were shooting in portrait. There's lots of interesting things that came up, but I think it's as much as anything the level of cinematic storytelling that they were doing over it just being it's a game with people in that's a slightly frustrating game. It's a film, it's a proper film, it looks like a piece of cinema, but you can interact with it and challenge it and explore it, and that's what really kind of drew me into it. It's a weird thing to say that it doesn't massively differ from narrative script writing. I'm always trying to think of awful situations where you've got no good outcome, but you've got to make a decision. You're trapped. They're dilemmas. And I think what interests me is twofold. One is how do you make these impossible decisions under a time pressure and then see how it plays out. But also I'm really interested in the implications and the knock-ons of those decisions, and also how other characters are affected by that. So I was really interested in both things that I've done, really thinking about, well, you've chosen to do this decision, that's going to affect another character who 3 decisions down the line might be really annoyed at that and have bared a grudge with you and brought it back. So that's interesting. Like, what's the one thing that can happen that would make this situation worse? That's like my mantra of at any point in a film, what can happen now to make this worse? Is the way I think about it. When I did Pandemic, I did a lot of research into animal experimentation, and everyone likes to say animal experimentation is wrong, but then I've found, the amount of medical advances that only come through animal experimentation is incredible. So it's trying to peel back layers and trying to give people these decisions that peel back layers and make them question their sort of warmly held beliefs about themselves in a really difficult situation, and it makes you learn more about yourself, which is what I find really interesting, and why it's really lovely to make it interactive, because you can test that. You can go, when you watch a film you think, oh, I would have done this, but in an interactive film you can go, well, you can do that, see how that works out for you. Like when I was about 15, I really couldn't face going to school. I had this real, like a near breakdown. And I remember my mom telling me on one day, she said, oh, you're going to put your uniform on. I'd been off for about 6 weeks. You're going to put your uniform on today. We're going to go into school and get you some work to do. And she took me into school, took me to the head of year and said, he's coming back today. And she left the room. And like my mom lied to me, got me into school and just dumped me there. I was taken to class, and within like 5 minutes, people said, oh, are you all right? And I'm like, yeah, okay. And no one had really asked me about, and it was just as if everything was normal. And I think there was something, I think that's such a key moment in my life, this sense of like, I could have been stuck in the way that I was. People could have just gone, oh, slowly, but actually just to be thrown into it. I mean, that might be really unhelpful for other people, but at that moment was like, oh wow, my mom's made this really difficult decision and she's seen it through and she's had this plan and she's seen how it's worked out. And it worked out great. And I think it's affected a lot of like the decisions that I've made in my own life of, you just got to go and do it. The more I think about it, that's the thing that sort of sits at the back of everything that I do, really. We shot for 5 weeks in January of the first pandemic. So we were all bubbled off and it was really intense. And we shot in probably like 10 different locations. We shot in a disused prison. We shot in a scrapyard, a sort of storage area for caravans. And so it was difficult. Chloe, the producer, did an incredible job scheduling everything. Everyone in production was brilliant for just organising it all. And it was very tight. Me and Ash, the DOP, went through the shot list twice, which took about a week, just whittling it all down. I spent a long time rehearsing on Zoom with all the main cast, so they were totally up to speed, and we played with it and explored it. I wanted everyone as prepared as possible for when we were there, that we were just doing it and getting it on camera. And we just kind of got through it, really. Our production designer, Louis, did an amazing job. And he was always one day ahead of us. So we'd arrive at these places with sets built, but we'd never see him. And so he would then go to the next place to get the next thing ready. And then once he'd done that and we'd left a location, he'd go and de-rig it. And so occasionally you'd hear people going, "Who's that guy over there? There's a guy over there. Oh, that's the production designer. He's just never quite in sync with us." You know, it was a full-on shoot. It was, pretty tiring, but we got it done. There were definitely times when the actors, they would you just need 10 minutes to go, right, you've made this decision, this decision, this decision, and then you'd shoot it. And then there were a couple of times where, okay, now you've made a totally different decision, but we've got to backtrack that and work out why your character would be open to making two totally different decisions at any point, so that it comes from a kind of realistic and logical place, rather than it just being, and now you've got to make the other decision. The other thing with interactive filmmaking is I think it does make you a better writer and a better director, because you have to think about all these things in so much more depth to understand, and you get such a great idea of your character going, well, I've tested them in all these different places. They're really well rounded just by the fact that they're going to experience all of these different decisions. We were shooting in COVID, so we were bubbled off, so we always had our COVID supervisor there. Just getting things done in the amount of time that we'd got is always a challenge. Post was a challenge because, again, it was all done socially distanced. Because so much of editing is so fine, to do it over Zoom, which is like 12 frames a second, is just really difficult. Keeping people warm was probably the biggest challenge because it was freezing. There's the one scene where Rob is in the hospital bed and he's in like a gown, and I think it was like -2 in the room, and he'd got it was like incredibly cold, and he'd got thermal clothes on all under everything that he was wearing, and he'd like pull them down, and we'd have hot water bottles that were just thrown at him between takes. So it was just those like physical aspects of being in those spaces, which looked amazing but weren't comfortable. And being in like a really haunted Victorian prison in a COVID pandemic in the winter, it's just never comfortable. No one's going to be in there going, I'd like to come back here afterwards, like just hang out. You just have to keep going and keep laughing and just, get that sort of, I don't know, blitz spirit in a kind of British way. Haunted prison was fun because it was just a strange place to be. I think all the stuff in the swimming pool was really good fun just because it's an amazing location. Lots of the exteriors where people get shot, where like the journalist gets given the tape, where Stark gets, like there's a handover with Stark, were all done in the loading area of a shopping centre. So there's something quite funny about like this quite big shopping centre in the Midlands in the UK was basically turned into a sort of like fascist hellscape. Yeah, I mean it all kind of blurs into one big experience. I think the final thing, there's a scene with fireworks on the front of a tractor, which was the very last thing that we shot. That was fun because it was the kind of end of it. Everyone was really proud of what they've done, and it was such a ludicrous shot, such a kind of ludicrous idea. And there's always something joyful about like that ludicrous idea you have sitting in your house while writing it, and then actually thinking, all these people have come together to make this thing really happen, which is always like, I enjoy that more than anything.